Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Colby. Today we're going to be looking at cognitive services on Azure. If you're not aware about what cognitive services is, it's Microsoft's AI stack. And so it allows you as a developer to use things like computer vision or text analytics without having to train fancy machine learning models. So all that work has been done for you, and you have access to use a variety of APIs that Microsoft provides via Azure. So if you want to read more into what cognitive services is and how you can apply it in your development, feel free to go to azure.microsoft.com, and then you can search for cognitive services in there. Just to kind of give you a brief overview of cognitive services, Microsoft's defined it into kind of these 5 main groups. So we have decision, language, speech, vision, and web search. And so today we're going to be looking at more of the language side. We're going to be using text analytics to access, detect the sentiment of our text, as well as detect the language type. And then we will also be using vision, specifically the computer vision portion, to detect the type of objects in an image. So we'll be building out 3 methods based off language as well as vision, and that'll give us an idea of the types of information we can pass to the API and what can get returned if you want to implement this into your actual applications. So without further ado, let's get started. So today we're going to be using Visual Studio, but you can also use Visual Studio Code if you don't have Visual Studio, and we'll also be using Azure as well. So the first thing I want to get started before I jump into Visual Studio is I launch portal.azure.com, and we're going to be creating a cognitive service resource. And so to do that, you'll just go into one of your resource groups and you'll just say add resource, and all you need to do is search cognitive services. See it pop up there, and so you'll be creating one of these resources. So just go ahead and hit create. You'll be picking your resource group. In my case, I'm going to leave it in this YouTube Cog Services demo, but you can pick or create a new resource group if you want. And then in terms of the region, I'm going to be placing mine in West US just because it's close to me, and giving it a name. Just call it YLab, and you'll notice once you've named something, if you get an X, it means that you can't use that name. And if you go to the info here, you'll notice that it can only include alphanumeric characters, underscores, and hyphens. And you can't start the name with a underscore or hyphen. So just be aware of that if you're getting some errors returned for your name. And once that's done, you'll pick your pricing tier. So the current one is the standard that we'll be picking. And then these are just some checkboxes, making sure you're not part of a police department and that you've understood the notices. Okay, so you can go ahead, obviously, like create tags if you want for this resource. In our case, we're just going to create it. So hit create, and it'll take a few seconds, maybe a minute, but it should be pretty quick. There you go. It's already deploying, and so once it's done, we will go to our resource. So there you go, it's done. So I'm going to hit go to resource. You'll notice in the overview, it'll give me a status as well as my location, and so I know this is good to go. The one thing that you will need is you'll need to grab your key here. So either key 1 or key 2, because we're going to be needing that for our demo today. So either keep this open or copy this to a text file so you can use it for later. Okay, so once you've got that done, I'm going to fire up Visual Studio, And we're going to be creating just a simple console app today. In this case, it's a .NET Core app to build this quick and easy demo. So I'm going to hit next. I'm just going to call this Cog Services Demo, and place that in the same. So I'm going to hit create. So it's just going to take a few seconds to create my project. All right, and I'm just going to fit this to my screen. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to install our dependencies for this project. So there are a few nuggets that we need, nugget files that we need that this demo is dependent on. So to do that, you're just going to go to project, and if you go to manage NuGet files here, I'll open this management area, and so we'll just hit browse. The first thing that we're going to need to install is Microsoft.Azure.Cognitive Services.Language. Hit search, and we will see, it's going through here to see it, text analytics. Should specify that it's the text analytics one. So it's this one right here. So we're going to hit, I'm just going to grab the latest stable version and hit install. And so I'll just take a few seconds to kind of install the various dependencies that this guy needs. So hit OK and accept. And you can also install, if you're using Visual Studio Code, you can also install packages by typing in, and I'm just going to type it up here for you. So you'll type in .NET add package and then the package name. So in our case, a package name is Microsoft.Azure.Cognitive Services.Language.TextAnalytics. Quite the mouthful. Okay. All right. So that package is done. The next thing we're going to need to do is install the computer vision portion of the cognitive services. So that is just Microsoft.Azure.Cognitive Services.Vision.Computer Vision. And hit return. And it's this guy right here. And again, install the latest stable version of that. Accept. All right, so everything's installed and we're good to go. So I'm just going to close the NuGet manager there. And what I'm going to do is insert a few things in here that we're going to be using. So we will be using system. I'll be using system.net.http. We're going to be making some HTTP calls, right? Because we're calling the APIs using system.collection.generic. We're going to be using system.threading. So we're going to be using we're going to do some asynchronous methods today, as well as using system.threading.tasks. All right. That's good. Those are all the system libraries we're going to be referencing today. And the next thing we're going to be doing is referencing those dependencies we just installed. So the first one is Microsoft.Azure.CognitiveServices.Language. Language. And then the next one, I'm just going to copy this, so I don't need to type that out again. And then we're going to be using, sorry, this should also be .TextAnalytics here. And then here we want to get the models from that. The next one we're going to be doing, so I'm just going to copy and paste this just to save time here, .vision and .computer vision. Copy that, and also has models that we want to be referencing. And then the last thing I want to add is Microsoft dot, and we're going to do the REST library. Okay, so that's all good. I'm going to hit save. All right, so the first method, actually the first class that we want to create up here is going to be creating our credentials class to handle our credentials for our cognitive services. So I'm going to call this API key service client creds. Okay, and this is using the service client credentials. So type service client credentials, and I'm going to, in brackets here, I'm going to create a private read-only string. And so this is going to be our subscription key. All right. And then I'm going to create a public method, which I'm going to call API, same name as this actually. All right. And in that, I'm going to pass a string, which is just going to be my subscription key. All right, and once you got that, then I'll say this dot subscription key is equal to the subscription key that I just passed. Pause again. All right, we're good there. And then the last thing I want to do is I'm going to create a method that is going to process the HTTP requests. So this process HTTP requests async, and so if I'm going to have an if statement here, if my request is null, so there wasn't a request passed in, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw an exception saying that you know there was an issue with the request, just so we're aware. So if you passed in a null request, otherwise what we're going to do is we're going to process that request, but what we have to do is create a header for that. So if you go request.headers.add, and in that you're going to add this header name OCP APIM dash subscription dash key. Okay, and then comma, we're going to be passing in that subscription key that we created up here. Right, and once that's good, we are ready to handle our HTTP request. Right, so we've created that class that's going to handle our API call, the HTTP request. The next thing we're going to want to do is create our various methods that actually call the various cognitive services, right? So remember, we're doing 3 today. First 2 are going to be text analytics based. So the first one is going to be to determine sentiment of the text. So basically sentiment is you determine whether something is negative or positive. So if you said I hate you, that would be negative. If you said I love you, that would lean more to the positive, right? So this can be great if you want to get some idea of, say you're looking at people on Twitter, what types of things they're saying about your product. You can get an idea, are they saying positive things about you or negative things about you? And so it can be, you know, a really powerful tool if you're needing that type of thing. And then the next one we're going to be doing in terms of text analytics is determining if the language returned. So let's just say you got this text of language and you're not sure what it is. You can determine, you know, that the language type. And then the final third thing, the method that we're going to be doing, which is the computer vision side, that we're going to be looking at. We're going to be passing it some images and getting a return back of what it thinks are the objects in that image. All right, so what we're going to do is begin with building our first method. So the first method that we're going to be building is the detect language method. So just after our main, which actually I'm going to remove these arguments because we don't need any arguments. We're just going to be running the console app. So the first method that we're going to be building is this static async method, which we are going to call detect language. Okay, so this is just you're going to pass in a language here, and it will return the type of language that you've passed in. So if you passed an English phrase, it should return English. Just above our main, we're going to have two of these constants. Private constant string. Sorry, it's const string. And we're going to call this one, this is going to be our cognitive services key. So I'm just going to call this cog services secret. Okay. And this is going to be a string value, and I'll just leave that as blank for now, but once we're getting ready to run this, I'll go ahead and copy one of the keys from our cognitive services and pass that in. The next thing that we want is I want to pass in the endpoint. So the endpoint is the address that we're accessing the API. So in our case, I'm using the West US one. And so depending on which one you've selected, yours might be slightly different. Oh, sorry, private there. So in my case, it's westus.api.cognitive.microsoft.com. So if yours is somewhere else, you'll just have to change this to match what your appropriate region is. So yeah, okay, so that's done. So the first thing we're going to do in this method to detect language is we're going to create our credentials. And so this is basically creating, we're using this class that we've created to be able to make the HTTP request. So API key, creds, and we're going to pass in our secret there. So that's going to be our cog services secret. All right. And so now that we've got our credentials, we're going to create our client, which is a text analytics client, which is part of one of the libraries that we installed, this text analytics library. And so in that, we are going to pass in our credentials that we've just initialized above, and then we are going to pass in the endpoint. So this can be a little confusing, but this particular endpoint here, this endpoint here is this endpoint, and then this endpoint is actually part of this text analytics client. So you can always rename this endpoint something else if you find that a little confusing, but just be aware of that. Okay, so now that we've got our client, we are then going to pass it in our data. So I'm just going to call this input data, and it's a new language batch input. Basically what I'm doing here is I'm passing in I'm doing a batch, so I'm passing in multiple language inputs, and I'm just gonna make that go down. Actually, let's do this. Make that go down. And in here, we're going to be creating a new list, And in this list, we're going to do a list of language input. Oops, spelling language incorrectly here. So language input. So it's a list of language inputs, and that is actually going to be this. So just fix this here. So I put the curly brackets before. I should have put them after here. And in here, we're going to be passing in our various different languages. So the first language input, I am actually going to copy some languages that I have. The first thing that you need to do is pass in an ID. So just be aware that that ID needs to be unique. So don't if you pass in like 1111 for like multiple, you will get an error. And then the next thing we're going to pass in is our text. So I'm just going to copy and paste this from something I've already written. Okay, and then you do comma, and you can create multiple other language inputs if you want. So remember, this is a batch, so we can do multiple. So I'm just going to paste 2 more in here. And again, I'm just going to copy and paste some existing examples. You can do whatever language you want. You can try to test this out. And remember, as I said, you need to make sure those IDs are unique. Okay, and once that's done, once I've passed in my results there, I'm then going to create a results variable, which is going to capture the results returned from the API. So I'm taking my client and I'm saying I want to detect the languages that are passed in here. And remember, it's batch languages. So if you just want to do one, you just call the detect language async. But in this case, I'm doing a batch. And they do have, as you can see, if I go back here, trying to get it to show you. 1 second. Detect. You'll notice that there's also non-asynchronous methods that you can call, but we're going to be doing async. And in here, I'm going to input my data, pass in my input data. And that's it. So what I'm going to do is create a console.writeLine. And in here, I'm just going to, just so it's obvious that what portion of code this is when we print to console, I'm going to type in language recognition. Let's call this language recognition. Okay. And then finally, I'm going to print all those various results from my language. So I'm going to do a for each. And I'm going to say var document. And in results, so the results that I got returned, .documents. And in here, I'm going to just do a console.writeLine. I don't know why it's doing that. .writeLine, and I'm going to pass in, I'm just going to say document ID, and in here we're going to have our document, don't know why it's document.id, and also my language, obviously my most important part, document and then detect languages. All right, and then just to create a new line, I'm just gonna make a new line return just so that there's spacing in between each of the methods. Okay, so that's the first one done. Next one, I'm going to create my next method, which is my sentiment method. So remember, we're detecting this is positive or negative, right? Type sentiment that we're passing in. So same thing, we're creating a static async task, and in this case we're going to say detect sentiment. And same thing as above here. So I'm just going to copy this because we're using the exact same text analytics API, and then we are going to pass in our language, or sorry, different phrases to detect the sentiment. So the first one, so I'm just going to do same thing, similar to above. So we're doing input data. This is slightly different though. This is the it's called multi-language batch. Okay, so we're doing a batch again. Again, you could just do a single line if you want. And so I'm going to do a new, again, list. And in this case, we're doing the multi-language input. Okay. Just going to close this so it stops getting mad at me. And then I'm going to do a new multi-language input, and I'm going to pass in, again, an ID and then my text. And I'm just going to copy and paste this. I'm going to do it 3, also do 3 in this one. And again, I'm just going to copy and paste some examples. Okay, feel free to add as many of these as you want, you know, in your list, as well as whatever you want in there. The other thing I'm going to add in here is add in my language. So in my case, this is all English. All right, so now once I got that down, I'm going to get my results, just like above. So I do my wait client dot, and in this case, we are going to be doing the sentiment one. So it's a sentiment batch. We're doing it asynchronous, and then I pass in my input data. Okay, and then I will be doing a for each loop. So I'm going to just copy this above just to save time. In this case, I'm going to call this sentiment analysis. Okay, and get my results. And for each of these, I'm going to be getting my score. So what happens with sentiment analysis is it returns the score. And you know what we're going to do instead of doing that? Just doing that, I should say. So I'm just going to call the sentiment score. And I'm going to do another something else where I'm going to say is, and I'm going to say, so above here, I'm going to have some if statements. So I'm going to say if document dot score is greater than 0.5, then my sentiment meaning is going to be positive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say var sentiment meaning equals, and I'm just going to create a blank string up here, and then I'm basically just going to set this guy to positive, else we will set that to negative. And I'm going to take this, I'm going to paste it in here. All right. So there you go. Just going to zoom in a little. All right, so that's done. That portion is done. And then we're going to do our final method here. And in this one, this is where we're going to be doing the detect objects. So we're going to be using the computer vision. So I'm just going to call this detect object. All right. And similar again to above, I'm going to copy this and modify it slightly. So obviously we don't need the sentiment meaning. And our client is not going to be text analytics this time like the other two. Our client is going to be the computer vision client. All right, same thing, passing in credentials, endpoint is the exact same. All right, so now that we have that done, I'm going to just have this guy here and just say this is object detection. One. The reason I'm doing one is I'm actually going to pass in 2 images. So just an easy way of, determining where the first image and where the second one is. So this will be the first image. And then I want to actually create some strings. So I'm just going to copy and paste this because they're long. But I'll include these links in the description. These are just pulled from GitHub, some samples they had online. So I am going to just add that here. Add the second one here. All right, so first thing I want to do is I'm going to detect results. Okay, so I call this detect result. And the detect result actually have it, let's just see here. Sorry, I don't know why I'm calling it as a method. It's of type detect result. You can see this, if I hover over this, this is in the computer vision models. And so I'm just going to call this one the analysis from the from computer vision, and I'm going to say await.client.detect objects async, and then I'm just going to pass in image URL. It's really simple. So that's the first analysis, and again I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to call this analysis 2 and URL 2, right? You don't have to declare it as detect results. You could just declare it as a variable if you wanted to. All right, and then what I need to do is I'm going to create a new method here. And this is just going to be a void method because we're just going to be printing. I'm going to call this object info. And so this is just going to print any of the information of the object. And I'm going to call this detect result analysis. And in here I'm going to say for each. And I'm just going to call this var object that is in my analysis dot, and we're going to be getting the objects in there. And so in here I'm just going to do console.writeLine. Oh, I really can't type today. It's just not my day. And in the object I'm going to get the property. Object property, with confidence. So this is just the confidence score. So it'll say it's a type of object. Let's just say it's a cat, and then it'll give you a confidence score saying what's the what do I think the likelihood is that it's a cat. Sorry, it's called confidence, not score. Okay, and then there is also a location to this. You don't really need to type this out, but I'm just going to type it out anyway. So say if you wanted to, let's say you want to draw some rectangles around those images. If you show the image to the user, you get a location returned back, and so this will help you find the location of that of each of those points of that rectangle. So first I got the X. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the object.rectangle.width. Okay, so basically I get the x-axis, then I'm adding the width to the x-axis point, the point on the x-axis, sorry, and so that's going to give me a line. And so basically we're just getting the points to draw out this rectangle around the object. Object.rectangle.height. Okay, so sorry that was a little long. And semicolon. All right, and we got that all done. And you know, again, if you want to, I'm just going to copy this guy and just give it a new line. In our case, it doesn't really matter because there's nothing that's going to be called after that. And then for each of these, I'm going to call this object info. So I'm going to pass in analysis here. And also analysis 2 there. And that's it. We've got our three methods that we've created, and now all we need to do is call those methods. So in our main, I'm just going to collapse this. So in our main program here, let's just type something in here. Let's just say 3 samples of cognitive services. And then in here, I'm going to type the first one, so detect language. And so detect language, and then we're just going to have a dot wait since it's asynchronous. And then the next one, we can say detect sentiment, wait, and then detect objects, dot wait. All right, and that's it. So all we need to do is I'm going to go wrong. Okay, and that's it. So all I need to do now is go into my browser and copy my key, and I'm going to, paste my key in here. And bear in mind, this key will not work if you try this, because I'll be deleting the resource. But obviously you should not be sharing this key with anyone, because this is your key to use your service. So if someone got hold of this, they could really ramp up costs for you. So just be aware of that. Also, in a real world situation, you don't want to be putting your key directly in your application like this. You would probably put it in a key vault for instance, an Azure Key Vault, or some encrypted service, or make sure it's encrypted so that no one can intercept that and start using it. All right, so we've got that. I'm going to hit save. I'm just going to hit run. And so this is going to pop up here. Invalid bad request. Let's see here. Post in my sentiments. Just trying to see if this looks correct. Getting my text analytics client. I'm doing a batch. Oh, sorry, I was looking at the wrong one here. Yeah, no, that's the correct one. So, multi-language, batch input. See what I did wrong here? I actually said don't do this. So the IDs were all set the same. That's what happens when you copy and paste. All right, so let's run this again. And we're done. So the first thing you'll notice, language recognition. So there were 3 languages that we had. So the first one, which I said detect languages. I see why. So you'll notice this is actually a list. So let's just close this. So this is actually in a list. So what you want to do, because you're going to get multiple languages returned, say .name. Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to rerun this again. So you'll see the first language is French, which is correct. Next one's Spanish, that's correct. And the third one is Korean. So you'll notice that these returned and you get your scores. You could obviously cut these scores down if you wanted to. In our case, the first one was negative, which it said I hate it here. So that's pretty negative, right? And that gave it a 0.06 score. The second one is what a great place to be. That got 9.97, so we said that's definitely positive. And the first one says I'm confused, which thought that was quite negative. Actually thought that was more negative than I hate it here, which is quite interesting. And then the third one are these different images. So I'll show you what those images are, and then you can see why it said this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It said there were 5 people in here and gave the specific locations as well as the likelihood. The first person it wasn't really certain about, give it a 0.5, so 53% likelihood. And then the rest were pretty likely, so it was pretty sure those were people. And then the second image is, it said it was pretty much 90% confident it was a scissors. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just show you quickly the different images. So this is the first image, and you see it thought that there were 5 people. There happened to be 6 people in here, so it actually sort of failed, right? It is probably very confused with people being very close together, like this woman with this child here. Their faces are very close together, so it's probably struggled to pick that up. But if you drew over the boxes that we got returned, you could see which one it was struggling with. So it probably would bunch up one of these groups together as thinking it was one person. And then the next one, it was 90% confident. That was just that these were scissors, and it's correct, and there was only one scissor in there. So awesome. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It's really kind of straightforward presentation of how to use the Azure Cognitive Services APIs and how easy they can be to implement into your app. So again, what we looked at was we were looking at using language detection. So specifically, that's the text analytics portion. The other text analytics portion of cognitive services we used was to detect sentiment analysis. And then the final one, we were using the computer vision area of cognitive services, and that was to detect what type of objects were in our images. So obviously there are a bunch of other different types of cognitive services that you can use. So I really recommend, if you're wanting to play around with the other ones, that you just take a look at what they can do and how, and maybe read in how you can pass in the various data. There could be things like you want to train up your own computer vision model, so you can actually do that. There's a custom vision component of cognitive services. Maybe you want to do some language translation, so you can do that as well. So there's so many different ways that you can add cognitive services into your app, and it can help a lot in terms of being a developer that you might not know a lot about computer vision, or maybe you don't really want to get into the nitty-gritty of having to train your own models. This definitely gives you that flexibility of doing that really quickly and easily, and the cost is relatively low, right? If you were to have to train up your own models, it can be quite costly in terms of computing power. So maybe you don't even have a computer that's powerful enough to train up models like that. So this can help you kind of alleviate those variety of issues. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe. I have some more videos coming out next, and look forward to catching you in the next one. See ya.